So, welcome to everyone who's joined us for today's Lunch and Learn, which is with the fabulous Steph Benjamin from Icehouse Ventures. Kia ora, Steph.
Kia ora. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this really interesting information about investment if you're thinking about getting started. So, the reason that I'm interviewing Steph is because quite a few members contacted me about they've been struggling to find jobs, so they're thinking about starting businesses. And then I've been getting lots of questions about finding a co-founder and other logistical things, but lots of people asking questions about the investment landscape if they are starting a tech company. So I immediately thought Steph's the perfect person for me to ask questions about that. For everyone who's in the webinar, you're welcome to ask Steph questions by using the Q&A function, and I will just seed those into the conversation as we go. But let's kick this off. So if you could start off, Steph, by telling us a bit about yourself and about Icehouse Ventures and what you do and what your role is, that would be great.
Awesome. No, thank you so much, Vic. Kia ora and hi to everyone that I cannot see, but thanks for joining. I'm Steph, so I'm part of the investment team at Icehouse Ventures. We're New Zealand's most active investment venture capital firm, and so we invest in brave founders who are building ambitious ideas that are wanting to take global. Our only scope is New Zealand founders, so we invest at all stages, all industries, which makes our job quite complex, but it also allows us to meet a lot of awesome people and back a lot of really impactful journeys, which is very fun. I'm personally based in Marlborough, which is a bit odd for my job. The startup ecosystem here is just in the early stages of evolving, but I'm up in Auckland a lot with the team. My background's always been in startups, particularly in youth enterprise. So I was always really passionate about supporting young people to have the opportunities to pursue whatever idea that inspired them. I was lucky to be supported a lot when I was younger through programs like Young Enterprise, etc. So it was always made me really passionate about doing the same for others. And I also, which we'll talk a little bit more later, run a podcast called She Started It, which is all about inspiring women to be globally ambitious business leaders. And yeah, I think that's me.
Nice. Sounds like an exciting role. And you get to meet a really diverse range of people, eh?
Very much so. My main role at IV is supporting the companies that we've invested in. So as an investor, money is only a very small part of the support that you provide. It's all about how can we make sure they're surrounded by great people, whether that be their team members, advisors, just people to support them because the journey is really hard. Making sure they've got access to future capital, resources, everything to make the journey hopefully just a little bit easier.
And I love the fact you do all of this from regional New Zealand too.
I know. I feel like I want to be the council's poster child of like you can work with globally ambitious people from a very small town, but it just has a better lifestyle here. So
yeah, that's awesome. So I asked you to join us because I know people are interested in starting their own businesses, as I said before, and wanted you to talk to us about the investment scene here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So let's assume people that are watching this have already got their ideas sorted. They might even have started building their business, but they need to find access to investment. Can you talk us about what some of the options are and how they might go about that?
yeah, of course. So the advice I usually give prior to thinking about the options that are available out there is what are your personal goals for the business? Because that really narrows down what options might be suitable for you. And that could be you might be just wanting to start a business that supports yourself, like creates a great income for yourself and your family. And that's a great way to run a business. That's awesome. Or you might be thinking, I have an idea that's going to disrupt an entire industry and it's going to scale globally and I'm probably going to have hundreds of employees. And that's also a great way to run a business. And it's how you want to run a business is very personal to you. And it's based on your lifestyle, what your goals or ambitions are. And then you can think about what funding options might be right for that. So one funding option that can be suitable for a lot of options is bootstrapping, which is when you create your own revenue and that funds the growth of your business. That can tend to be quite a slow way to grow a business, but that is also a very sustainable way to grow a business and helps you retain 100% ownership of a business. So you might be looking at, like, for example, the podcast we're doing, that's a community, and we're bootstrapping that completely. So any money that comes into the business goes straight back to growing the business. And that's fine. But if you're building a deep tech company, say a fusion reactor or something like that, there's no way you could bootstrap that. There's probably no revenue for the next 10 years until you've developed the technology. And that could be a really great reason to go and get venture capital investment. And so, other options are, and one that I tell every founder to look at first, is grant funding options, because they're usually non-dilutive capital. So kind of free money, but not usually, there's conditions based on them. But like the likes of Callaghan, NZTE, all of those, a lot of government agencies will have options for grants that you could use for research and development or market validation, all of those things. And so always look at the options there. Crowdfunding is another good one. If you've already built a community, you can use that community to activate. They might want to own shares in the company, and it's a great way to raise. You could use something like Pledge Me or Snowball Effect, do larger equity raises for those. And then angel investment's great if you're maybe in the very early stages of an idea and you can bring on an angel who might have expertise in that sector. They might just really back you as a person and want to see how you're going to go. And that can be a great way to get smaller amounts of capital earlier on. There's obviously bank loans, which are suitable for probably more basic businesses. Well, not basic, more traditional businesses. Like we're looking at an engineering company at the moment, and that makes sense because it's nothing new, nothing innovative. It's just we need some money to buy equipment. And then venture capital is much more long-term, big, ambitious ideas, and that will probably require consistent funding for a very long time before they're profitable or create an exit of some form. So it's a lot of options, but it's good to have lots of options for money.
And is, generally speaking, in New Zealand, is there much in the way of venture capital funding around and accessible?
Yeah, so personally, I don't think there's enough. It's been quite a hard year economically, and we've seen a lot of funds maybe not be able to raise another fund, which means there's less capital available to founders, or the capital's a lot harder to get. I think the expectations on founders is higher than it used to be. And I think a lot of people compare it to 2021, where there was just capital flying out the door, but that was a very that was just a different year and really hard to compare anything to. But it's all part of it. And just because you're in New Zealand doesn't mean you can't look internationally for capital. It's a real relationships business. So if you can go out there and start building relationships with investors overseas that better suit the type of business you're creating is great too. But there are still a lot of great options in New Zealand. There's plenty of VCs. We actually have a resource on our website called Who's Who, and it lists all the venture capital and different investors that are available to New Zealand companies. And there's quite a lot on there.
Yeah, oh, that's really good to know. So you obviously talk to a lot of organisations. What's the most common piece of advice you find yourself giving people?
Yeah, I feel like it's a very basic piece of advice, but it's really easy, and I even do it myself when I'm creating projects. It's very easy to overlook it. And my piece of advice is to just talk to your customers. That validation piece matters so much, and it's really, really hard to get an investor to buy into your business if you don't even have the proof that this is a great idea. And we can tell, like any investor can tell when it's just an assumption. And I think any great innovation has a bit of assumptions of what you believe the future should be, but also you need to have assumptions that the problem actually, you need to have proof that the problem actually exists. And that comes from talking to your customers. So it's getting out there, sharing your idea with people who you think might be your target market, and sharing it in a way that's not leading them to agree with the solution, because it's very easy to be like, I've got this idea for this company. No one's probably going to tell you it's a dumb idea to your face. They're going to be like, oh, sounds great. That's not valid validation. Valid validation could be you've already got a lot of early signups, so you might have a great network of people who are interested in trying your idea. You might have some contracts already signed with companies who want to use your product before it's even built. There's lots of ways that you can show validation without having to spend a lot of money or build a big product. But you can't just say, I think people will like it. That doesn't really cut it.
Yeah. And market validation isn't your friends and family either.
No.
Yeah. Which I'm surprised how often I find myself telling people that.
Yeah. And I think it's really easy to think you're only doing it for an investor, but you're not. You need to do this for yourself. It's making sure you're confident that there's actually going to be people buying this out there to buy this idea before you spend so much time and resources trying to develop it.
And that's such a good point that you've raised. So many people get so focused on the pitch deck and the things that they need to produce for the investors that they actually forget that they're doing this to validate their own business as well.
Yeah, agree. And one thing I always say is investors love companies that customers love. And so you shouldn't be building it for us. You should be building it for your customers. And sometimes I really like it when a founder, it's like they just don't really care what their investor thinks because they're so focused on their customer and they're getting sales and they're getting the tracks on the board to prove that this is going to work. And that would make us more excited to invest in an idea as if they were just trying to impress us all the time. That's not going to build a long-lasting company.
Yeah. Now, we've got one question in the message board, which I'm going to ask you now from Sydney. They are asking, what do you need to prepare and be ready to present to investors before you start thinking about applying for investment?
Yeah. So I can send Vic through our resource hub after this because there's a lot of...
I can share.
Yeah, we've got a pitch deck template and then there's also common questions from investors. And I really like the pitch deck template, and it's not... And it goes again to, you don't need to just do this for investors. Running through a pitch deck template is a really good way to kind of do a checklist for you personally on what's important to your business. So a pitch deck template might talk about like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the solution you've designed to solve this problem? What validation do you have that that solution is right? What's the opportunity that you're going for here? And then like a bit about the business model. How's this going to actually work? How are you intending to make money? And then what do you need in order to get to the next stage? And again, they're really good questions for you to personally know about your business, not just for investors. So I like a pitch deck template as something that is really helpful to have prepared when you go to an investor, but also really helpful for you to just do a bit of an audit of your company.
Nice. Yeah. And a great guide, isn't it?
Yeah, agree. And it's also just a really easy resource to have. Like if a company reaches out to me and they're like, hey, I'm looking to do this, with the limited time we have, it's much easier for us to just review a pitch deck and then we can say, okay, this is actually suitable for us. Like it fits the thesis of our funds, because we also don't want to waste your time. You don't want to come meet with us if there's no way we can invest anyway. We're better off to just help guide you to who might be suitable to chat to about your funding options.
Oh, that's really awesome. I'll carry on with my questions and I'll get back to the message board. So, Steph, one of the things I really admire about you is in your role, you're very focused on women and bringing women into business ownership and supporting wahine leaders. Can you tell us a little bit more about the landscape? Are there many women out there starting businesses, and is there much in the way of investment focused for female founders at all?
Yeah, definitely. My honest opinion is I don't think there's enough women starting businesses. And I don't know where the disconnect is. We run a community for young founders, and I know Young Enterprise have majority women founders in their programs. Then we have a young founders community which is incredibly diverse. And then when it comes to the amount of funding going to women, it's very low. And I think there's different areas that there's issues with this. So one, I don't think there's enough women starting businesses. Two, I think the funding options are too limited for women starting businesses, and there's not enough funding going to women starting businesses. So it's a very complex problem. But what I find is it's more about the type of business you're starting, and then that can limit it. Like I look around a lot of my friends, and many of my friends are founders and they run really successful companies, but they're more consumer-based companies and they've built really successful brands. They're profitable, they're global, but they're not fit for the type of funding options that are available to women in New Zealand. You've got great funds like Even Capital, so they invest in women founders, and I hear that they particularly like companies that solve problems for women too. And then we also have a fund, Archangels, which was backed by Teresa Gadding, and a really incredible network of women investors and male investors, actually. And that whole thesis of that fund will only invest in women-led businesses. But again, it's venture capital investing, so it's a very certain type of company that we're looking for, which doesn't necessarily fit the types of companies that women are starting. So there are options out there, and women can go for all the traditional options like grant funding, bank funding, all of those things. But I think there's still so much work that needs to be done in order to create more funding options and support more women to start businesses.
So from everything I've read, and you've just reinforced it, it is pretty dire. The number of women going into business and the amount of investment available to women. So you mentioned Archangels before, and you mentioned your podcast. So can you talk a bit more about these support structures that you're trying to put in place for women in the investment world?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the way I've always looked at it is there's 3 areas that support entrepreneur to start. And that first one comes down to confidence. So you need to build the confidence in someone that they have the ability to achieve something great. And the way you do that is by showcasing people who they can relate to. So I used to find that a lot when working with young entrepreneurs, they wouldn't be inspired to do something until they saw someone that reflected them and their background who has gone off and done it. And right now, I don't think there's enough. There's some really great role models out there from all diverse backgrounds. And so we need to be doing better and showcasing them to everyone. So it's not just the same looking founder that's like the typical Silicon Valley founder. And so that's why we started our podcast. And the community there was really about our whole mission is to encourage more women to be globally ambitious leaders. And that came down to the fact that we were seeing a lot of women start an idea, but they weren't really doing something with, and this is just an assumption, there's still lots of women doing great things and that have a lot of purpose, but I don't think there's enough women believing in themselves that they can actually change the world and they can build something that will really make a mark on the world. And there are great women doing that out there. So we wanted to showcase their stories to inspire more women to feel like they can do that. And because been very lucky that I've been surrounded by a lot of incredible women who have gone off to do great things. And because I can relate to them now and I can see that they're just normal people and really, really fun people, it makes it a lot easier to believe that you could do something like that too. So I want to make sure a lot of women have that opportunity. Then the other 2 parts to that are you then need to give them the capability to do it once you've given them the confidence. And so that's making sure they're surrounded, they've got all the right resources, they've got the ability to raise money, like they know what to go to investors with. And so you could do that through resources and learnings from the interviews, all of those things. And then there's the connections. So you need to make sure they have a really solid network around them, whether that be investors, just supporters, because a lot of the time people's family won't be the ones to support them. They might think their business idea is absolutely crazy, particularly if you want to change the world. So you need to make sure you have a really good network around you who believe you can do it and are there to champion you through the whole journey. So it's like confidence, capability, and connections, I think, really matters. And so the podcast, the fund, the work I do at Icehouse Ventures all drives around those three areas and making sure women have access to those resources and things.
Nice. Thank you for that. We'll get back to the Q&A because there's quite a few questions now.
Yeah.
So the first one is, what advice can you give for dropping something or throwing away sunk cost or pivoting and dealing with the pain of that change?
Yes, I saw a really good post about this the other day on LinkedIn. I think it was from Toby, who's the founder of Appetize. And really, you've just got to drop it if it's not working. And I understand that you're going to feel really crappy about that. It's a lot of sunken cost, but the cost of continuing going on and losing the opportunity of something that could be great is much greater. And down the track, that would feel way worse than just dropping something that you know is not working. I feel like that's very much part of the journey. And investors understand it's part of the journey too. So if it's someone else's money that you've used to do that, if you can justify why you're dropping it and changing it, they understand it's all part of it. So.
And the next question is, what level of personal stake do you need to show you have in an idea/startup before looking at investors? Now, that's a massive question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very big question. And I think, again, it all depends on the type of funding you're doing. So, for example, at our podcast, we do it on the side. We're probably going to make money from sponsorship deals, etc. So it's the expectation on us to do this full time is not going to be there. When you're raising venture capital investment, if an investor is investing millions of dollars into you, they're going to want to see that you're fully committed to creating this. And the reason that is because investors are very much investing in you as a person. And your idea can be the coolest idea, but it's about what are you going to do and what are you bringing to that business to execute on it that really matters, because the idea is going to change. And so if you've got someone who's not fully committed, it can be really hard to have a lot of confidence that this is going to get to where it needs to be, because being a startup founder is typically a full-time gig. And the expertise and knowledge that you bring is what's really going to make this a success. So they want to see that you're committed to putting in that work, I think. But again, it's very dependent on the type of funding you're taking, and who from and what expectations are laid out. A lot of the time, if you've got a team of operators, someone else might be more of an advisor based on their experience. They might not be full-time in the business, but just having them there is enough for the investor, you know?
I once had a fund manager investor tell me that, or not me, tell someone else that I was a company I was involved with, that they wouldn't invest because the founder hadn't mortgaged their house yet. So they didn't see that commitment there. And I've also seen people who start their business but they still keep their day job, and then investors are seeing that they're not fully committed as well. Are those experiences things that you can relate to?
I wouldn't say the mortgage part of the house one. I don't think it's fair to put that kind of pressure on someone, especially like the reason they're coming out to get money is like so they don't have to put in personal. But I think the time thing really matters, because it's really, really hard to be, and the types of founders venture capital investing in are people who are just incredibly passionate about what they're doing. Like they're doing their life's work, and to do your life's work well, you need to be fully committed to it, I believe. And so the time thing really matters. Doesn't mean you can't do everything else. And I feel like we've really seen a shift, and I'm seeing it from a lot of very successful male entrepreneurs now, which makes me really happy, of still really prioritizing your family and making sure you're taking time off for your mental health. And we're not saying don't do those things. It's just saying you can't be great at something if you're trying to do too many things. I've personally experienced that myself. So I think it really matters, the time commitment.
And sometimes, I've met people who have come to me to pitch their thing, and they're just confusing because they've got 5 different ventures that they're trying to do at different stages, and you can just tell they're not going to be fully committed to the one that they're pitching.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, and that's really hard. Like for us, we're investing other people's money, and I couldn't put someone else's money on the line, and mine. We've invested too. I couldn't put someone else's money on the line if I don't have full confidence that they're really going to commit to doing what they say they want to do.
The next question on the message board you might not know the answer to, which is around, do you know of any limitations for international students looking for investment? So I'm assuming it means an international student here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, considering the dependency on their study visa.
Yeah, so I think it's very dependent to the fund. So for example, one of the investment thesis we have is that we invest in New Zealand entrepreneurs. So that is either people who are like their market is New Zealand, so they're committed, they're here, they might be a resident or something to deliver a solution to the New Zealand market, or they could be a Kiwi founder based overseas. That's fine too. So that's us personally. So I think visas do matter, like for us, if that's the case, but it's also very, very dependent on the specific individual and the types of funding that they're getting. So I wouldn't say it's a limitation, and I think you should be looking at funding options from all over the globe if you can. And so, yeah, probably not straight answer. I think it's very dependent on the individual and the type of fund or the funding they're trying to get.
Yeah.
I wouldn't let it limit them. I think it's worth just going to talk to investors, showcasing the situation you're in, and then figuring out solutions from there.
That gives them a good steer, I'm sure. So before we close, I wanted to also ask you about exit. So I will often meet people early in their idea stage and they haven't thought about exit. Can you talk a bit about how important it is to be really clear on what your exit plans might be for this business?
Yeah, so I think it's very dependent on the type of founder or the type of company you're building, and that goes back to what your personal goals are for the business. I declined a founder the other day who was building a really incredible business, great traction, really impactful problem, looks like they're going to have success, but their exit strategy is maybe in the next 2 to 3 years, someone might be able to acquire this. And so for us as venture capital investors, that's not really the types of businesses we're looking for. We're looking for companies who are building generational impact. And so it might take 10 years for some form of exit to arise. Founders typically have an idea of what that exit might be. They might IPO the company, they might have a buyer lined up. But usually for venture capital investors, if you're looking at founders who are doing their life's work and they're trying to disrupt an industry, a clear exit plan is very, very hard to have sorted early on. Other angel investors might ask for more of a structured plan, and that's just really something to talk one-on-one with them and figure out what it is for you. But I guess it goes back to your personal goals. Like, are you wanting to be part of a company for 20 years and your exit might be leaving the company after a big IPO event or some form of funding event? Or do you want to, I have friends who started businesses that are brand businesses, and their goal is in 5 years they want to be able to sell to a bigger brand, and that's just what they personally want to do. So your exit strategy is very personal to you and the type of business you're building.
But it also is really important depending on the investor that you're talking to, as you say, because some investors would frown upon that quick grow flick kind of model.
Yeah. Which doesn't mean it's a bad model. But
it's not a fit for some. Whereas others would see that as a great liquidity opportunity, and they can move on to investing in other things.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting, eh? Well, thank you so much for your time today. In the last minute, do you want to just tell us a little bit about if anyone wants to get in touch with iSouth Ventures, where they should go, and thank you for offering to share some resources that I can.
Nice. I'll flick you an email after this with everything. My best way to get involved is we've got a community newsletter, which I can send you the sign up link for, and that goes out monthly, and it covers events, resources, opportunities from us at iSouth Ventures, but also the wider startup ecosystem. If you do have a company that you're looking for funding, that's better to go through our deal flow process, which I can send through, which is a link to our investment team. But I find, the community newsletter is a great way to meet us, our team, come along to events that might be of value, and also help build your network of other founders and operators and startups.
Thanks, Steph. Love your mahi. Love the fact that you do this from regional New Zealand as well. It's just fantastic. Thank you for your time. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. And I will, with that, say ka kite.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Vic. Thanks, everyone.